Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. We are on episode 2 of Link Click, and I'm so happy I was able to get the subtitles on and everything before starting, and so it was not like last episode. Last episode I couldn't even go back and rewatch the episode during the discussion because it was just messed up. So luckily everything seems to be running smoothly with this. But this show, man, what a cool vibe. I went back and rewatched episode 1, so just to get my bearings back. But Lu and Cheng, man, so Lu has this ability, Lu Guang has this ability where he can basically go through pictures to inhabit people and reenact different things and change, to get, basically you go back in time and you reenact things that happened, but you can get information while you're reenacting them. So in the last episode through Emma, they basically inhabited her body through the picture in order to get information from a computer that she stumbled across during an incident. And so they didn't really change the future. Well, they weren't changing the future, except Cheng went beyond his boundaries. He did a big no-no. And so the idea was they were just supposed to get the information and get out. And that was it. But Cheng, he did more than he was supposed to, and he altered the future, and she ended up dying because of it. So there are consequences. If you mess with the future, it's gonna have consequences, and that's terrifying. So I'm like, I don't know if he'll ever tell Cheng about that or what, but that's pretty disturbing, right? So we have Lu, we have Cheng, and we have Lin. And there are 3 main people. I just saw where they're doing a Japanese dub of this show, but they've changed the name of the characters, I guess, for the Japanese dub, which I'm a little torn about. It kind of reminds me like when America does dubs of Japanese shows and they change the names. I'm thinking of like a lot of 90s shows, like Digimon, for example. We changed the name from we kept Tai, but we changed to Davis and Yoli. There was a couple names, maybe Yoli was the same, but there are a couple names that changed, like Davis's name changed, and Matt. Like Matt, for example, Tai and Matt. Matt was definitely a name change. So it reminded me of that. And I like that they're sticking. I like when they stick to the actual names. Like I saw where they're also doing Heaven's Official's Blessing in the English dub, but they're keeping the Chinese names, which I think is good. So I'm obviously going to keep the Chinese names for Link Click here because I'm watching it in the actual original Mandarin. So, But this show has such a cool vibe. It's so kind of creepy and X-Files sort of style. I like it a lot. I really dig it. So I want to know more about this power though. How did Lu get it? Where does it come from? We kind of went over the stipulations. You only got so much time to get in and get out with the information. And Cheng is the guy that goes in and Lu guides him. So really cool. The visuals in the last episode, the symbolism, some really interesting concepts being set up. And I want to explore them more. So I'm pretty excited. This episode's called Secret Recipe. I'm like, are we doing KFC? Or we're going to go find the Colonel and go through a photo for that? I don't know. But I'm pretty excited y'all to dive in and see what all ends up happening in this show. But without further ado, let's do that, shall we? We are going to start Link Click episode 2 here in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Ooh, yeah. Okay. So, man, this show is so interesting. And it has I don't know, I was trying to describe it at the end of the episode. It's that there's a little, ever since the end of episode 1 where we found out that girl was dead, there's a little bit of anxiety when I watch this show. It's you're kind of on the edge of your seat, on pins and needles, because they've established in this that you do one wrong thing, you change the future in one wrong way, and it's going to completely just, the time will, the universe will reset itself and try to catch up, and it's just completely ruin the future. So ever since then, I was like, ooh, so there's stakes. There's lots of stakes in this episode, even when they're not outright in front of you. It's and Cheng and Lu are very interesting characters. Lu is obviously very pragmatic. Lu is very quiet, stern, stoic. He's we got a job, we just get in, we get out. Because Lu knows what the consequences are if you goof. And Cheng is the more emotional one. He's the more open person. I find it interesting that so far in the last 2 episodes, Cheng has inhabited the body of a woman. I think that's really interesting. it feels like there's something to that. And I think that if you're trying to ship Lu and Cheng together, Lu is clearly the more masculine one, and Cheng maybe is the more feminine one of the two. I don't know if that's what it's saying, but Cheng is the more emotional of the two and seems to be the one that's more in touch with his emotions and is more expressive. And so he feels more, he feels more sympathy towards these characters as he goes back in time. Whereas Lu is just, no, we stick with the script. We have a job. We do this. We don't worry about it. We just go on with our day and just get the job done and go. And so I liked that in episode 1, it was just one photo they went into. They went in and got the job done. But in this one, they've had to go into multiple photos to try to find the clues, to keep going back to those moments to see if there's something. And honestly, it's Cheng that solves the case, because Cheng was wanting to delve more. He's like, there has to be something more there. And he ends up finding out that it was the powder made from the flour. And it seemed like everything worked out in this episode. Seemed like it all worked out. But there are clear parallels to this girl, Lin and Jia, and Lu and Cheng. There's big parallels. And the idea, like, we're 2 episodes in, we're discussing, like, the friendship of these two and, like, it being tested. I'm like, whoa, show, we just started. And you're already putting their friendship to the test? Okay, cool. I mean, we only get 11 episodes, so I guess that's what they're doing. But I was like, wait a minute. What are we doing, show? But, man, this episode and the animation changed. It's kind of abstract in the weirdest way. It's like the animation is very abstract, and not only the animation, but the concepts that it's talking about and the way that it goes about the symbolism and everything. It's very abstract, and I like it a lot. I've never really watched anything like this, so it's kind of crazy. It has like an X-Files, like the creepiness is kind of like X-Files vibe, but it's not. It's very unique. The show is extremely unique, and I love that about it. It's fresh, it's different, but it's so interesting. So I got bad vibes from this woman, Jia, from like most of the episode, that the secret recipe was, she was trying to get the secret recipe from her friend, her former coworker. And then as the episode goes on, you find out that it's her friend. And then you find out that they were probably a little bit more than that, just a bit. And as it goes on, you figure out the irony in all of it is that she didn't even need to hire these guys. The secret recipe was her own recipe that she brought to their dorm from the start. And that's what her friend Lin was trying to tell her the whole time. Yeah, it's crazy. So interesting. Okay, so I wanted to go back real quick because at the start of this episode, they do the film strip with them on it. So we have Jia and Lin. And then I like it, episode 2. The portrait is your mirror. It's you. August Sander. Interesting. The portrait is your mirror. It's you. Cool. Okay. And yeah, that OP, I love it. It's so freaking cool. So yeah, again, they're establishing at the start of this episode, we don't really get into how Lu's power, how he came to get this power. We don't get it explained. He just has it. He just has this ability. It's their way of making money, is taking on clients this way. And so I like that Cheng establishes early on in this episode that these two were friends and they formed this business together, and then they slowly drifted apart over the years. And Cheng says right from the start, he's like, what if we disagree with each other one day? Will we break up too? So we don't know the backstory of Lu and Cheng. We don't know how, like, can Lu do this ability with anyone, or does he have to form like a pact with them? Is there something like ties them together? I don't know. These boys also look like they need sleep. Lu and Cheng, they have so many like red circles under their eyes. They look like they need to sleep, which I don't imagine Lu sleeps a lot. But yeah, so then Lu flashes back when Cheng says that to the girl that died. And then Cheng says, if you dare play politics behind my back, I'll have to slap you. So, yeah, then I'll scratch your handsome face. Yeah, I totally get the vibe that these two kind of like each other, but it's just neither of them want to say anything about it, especially Lu. Lu is very tsundere. I don't know what the Chinese equivalent of tsundere is, but Lu is very tsundere. And so then, yeah, and Cheng's like, come on. And then I like that they do the rock, paper, scissors. She's like, you're stone, I'm paper. You lose, game over. And Cheng's like, you're more childish than me. The animation in this show is so fluid. It's like an oil. It's like a watercolor. just come to life. It reminds me a lot of Daokusei, Classmates, if you've ever seen that series. It's a movie and it's a manga, but it reminds me a lot of Daokusei, how like muted and watery the animation is. It's really cool. I like it. So I like that we get a little bit more in the world building with this power. It's established that while you're in the photo, you can look through other photos and use that as information. Like anything you see while in the eyes of the person you're inhabiting, you can look for clues and you can use any of that as information. And it all goes back to Lu, and Lu can decipher it while Cheng is in the body of that person. That's interesting. I think, but the idea is you have to keep on track. And somehow Lu knows the script. Lu knows the script of the photo and what is supposed to be said. And so it's kind of like, it reminds me of Modao Zushi when they use empathy, the technique empathy in Modao Zushi, because Wushin is able to have someone else possess him, but he has to like go along with whatever happens to them. It's kind of like that. This is kind of like empathy a little bit. But yeah, the moment when the Lin woman touched Ja's hand, I was like, oh, yeah, they were probably more than just friends. Especially when they're like, oh, you used to sleep with me after watching horror flicks in the dorm. Yeah. I'm going to say they were a little bit more than friends. Maybe a wee bit. But yeah, but this whole scene of trying to find the secret ingredient and her in the kitchen with her trying to probe for information, but she can't outright ask. You can't change the future. And Lu's like, what are you waiting for? Go to the kitchen. Do this, do that. Like poking him along. And the idea that it was nerve-wracking. It was nerve-wracking watching this because you can't give anything away. You've got to be in the moment. And it's harder than it looks because you're like, oh, well, you could just look around for the recipe, but it's not written anywhere because by the time these photos have been taken, these two have been making this stuff for so long that it's not a big deal. And then when she asks what the ingredient is, Lin says, oh, like you wouldn't know. Because she would know, because it was her ingredient. Ah, I love it. I love it so much. But yeah. And then the idea of, there's also a really interesting discussion about, there's a really interesting talk about sexism in this show. Like a very interesting talk. And like we got it in episode 1 with Emma, the idea of her being a woman at work in the workplace and the boss trying to take advantage of her and then being like sexually harassing her. And then at the very end, the guy takes advantage and kills her. And in this episode, it's the guy outside the warehouse and the taxi cab driver, both of them. The guy outside the warehouse, he's like getting ready to leave and he's going to leave all their ingredients there. And then we see he's like, oh, a lady boss. He's like, oh, well, you should get us married so you can have a handsome husband do this for you. And she, like, her as Cheng goes off on him and is like, well, then help me get this stuff inside and blah, blah, blah. It's an interesting commentary. And then the guy in the taxi cab makes the assumption that she's married and in a fight with her husband because she's going on about how, grumbling about everything. And he's like, oh, I'm a taxi cab driver and I hear these stories all the time. So feel free to rant about your husband. It's just going to go in one ear and out the other. But the way that he said it is really creepy. And so I just get the impression there's like kind of a sexist undertone about this world and about this. And I find it interesting that so far Cheng has inhabited women throughout this series. It's just something that's interesting, right? But yeah, so, and the idea that Cheng has to eat all these noodles, and every time he keeps coming back, Lu just has like pop-up ramen. He's like, until we get the job done, we can't afford a nice bowl of noodles, so you're gonna eat instant ramen until we get the job done. But yeah, I love that we get to experience all this. And so yeah, the idea of don't jump to judgment. So the whole time Cheng is trying to figure out, like, well, this Lin girl doesn't seem like a bad person. It doesn't seem like a bad person, so it's hard to believe that she'd just steal the recipe. And Lu says, don't jump to judgment. That's not it. And the funny thing in all of this is that she didn't steal the recipe. It was their friendship and everything. So it's really cool, the idea of Lu trying to give Cheng this pragmatic advice as he goes through this series. It's very interesting. But yeah, so the scene of them eating the noodles together, and they were about to share the noodle and do like Lady and the Tramp style, and then it just happened by accident, supposedly, and Lu's like, no, you can't let that happen. That's not part of the plan. And so then he has to, and that was so awkward where he had to like fake the noodles and slurped it. And luckily she took it in stride, but I was like, whoa, okay, we're going there. And so then the reporters come in to get the secret ingredient, and Lin cuts them off. and they go through it shows them like the montage of them going in photo after photo. And so over time, what I like about this is that over time, the restaurant starts to get more and more advanced, and Ja seems like she is trying to advance the restaurant to make it more popular, to get them more money, to make it bigger, to get like more sponsorships, to open up, to get more clients, and just to make, she seems like she's in the shop for the fame of it all and to make a name for themselves. Whereas Lynn, she just started the shop because they were friends and they wanted to be together, and this was like their passion project. So Lynn's like, I don't care about making all this money and about this management system and these apps and everything. She's like, I just did this noodle shop to be with you and to run it with you because we're friends. And you're the one that's taken this way too far. And so, yeah, it's like Ja's, and Cheng even notes it. He's like, Ja's the one that changed over time. She's the one that changed and strayed away from Lynn. And Lynn kept on the steady path with the noodles. And so, yeah. And then in that moment, the last photo, I like that Lou says there's no point because there's no clues. But Cheng convinces him to try it out, the photo that's left. And they do, and that's when she gets in the taxi cab and he's looking at the phone and sees the tickets in her purse about the Zhuang, or wherever that place was. What was it? Where did they say it was? The place. But that's where the flower was from. And we assume that that's where she's going back to work. She's going back to the beginning where the flowers were originally from, back in Ja's hometown. And that's where she's going to start the noodle shop. And so I like that this had a happy ending. I like that in the end, because of that revelation that it was the spice, the flour crushed up from the hometown of Ja, that she realized what her friend was doing and that it was all because of her. And so they went back and reconnected. When they hugged each other, it was like, yes. So I like there was a positive, happy ending to this. For a moment, I was like, is there going to be a bad ending? Is this going to end badly throughout every episode? But no, they had a happy ending. And Cheng didn't really change anything. Cheng just went in that extra photo that they didn't need to. And then after that went into the photo with the dorm. And that's when Cheng realized that the spice was originally Ja's. And that Lynn had just used it because she loved her friend and wanted to use it. So I really liked this episode. This was really good. And then at the very end, Lynn, they get the noodles made. And I like at the very end, they make the noodles and Lynn takes off with one bowl and leaves Lou and Cheng with the bowl that's left. And they have to share it just like Ja and Lynn did. Aha! So there's lots of little subtext, little things that happen throughout this episode. Lots of little things like Lou like poking and getting all up in, or Cheng getting all up in Lou's business and Lou like shoving him away and all of that. There's the idea. I love that the animation style, it changes as Ja was going back home, and it melded between the dormitory, like that last photo, and the present where she's going back to see Lynn. I liked that the animation like flowed and changed and transformed. It was very dreamlike and surreal. It was really, really cool. But yeah, just this episode being about the bonds of people, the bonds between Lynn and Ja. And the thing of it is, Lynn and Ja had a breakup, but then at the end, they were able to reconnect because they went back to the beginning and realized what forged their friendship from the start. And from the start, what forged their friendship was that dream that they had together, and that one bowl of noodles in the dormitory, slow cooker, before they even had an idea to have a business, that one slow cooker bowl of noodles. And Ja, like you could tell Lynn made the noodles and then Ja added the spice. And that was like the merging of the forging of their friendship. And you see that like come together there at the end, and you've seen it like blossom and go along its entire course throughout the entire episode. And then the very end, juxtaposed with the beginning, it's the present where they're meeting back up again at Lynn's new shop and them hugging together. So it's kind of hopeful because you can tell Lou is worried at the beginning of this episode that if Cheng finds out about the girl, Emma, that he's going to be, if he finds out about the girl, then he's going to be heartbroken and probably mad. And you can tell Lou at first is a bit afraid that their friendship may be strained and ruined because of that incident. But then by the end of this episode, it's kind of hopeful and kind of says, okay, well, yeah, you guys may have a falling out, but you can always go back to the beginning of why you were friends from the start and stay friends and reforge that friendship. So I don't know. But this show is so cool. I love this episode. It's just the right balance of it's funny, but it's abstract and creepy at times. It has this like anxiety-inducing undertone, but you're kind of drawn in. You're sucked into the mystery of it. Like, I love the mystery and the thriller. It's more of a thriller than anything because, yeah, there's mystery and there's comedy, and in this there's a little bit of romance, but this show's really like a thriller. It's just, it has you on the edge of your seat, and you're like, you want to figure out what's going to happen, but then you also want to make sure that like Cheng doesn't change the future or that things go okay. And what is the ending going to be, bad or good? Because now we've seen a bad ending and we've seen a good ending. So it's like either the mission's going to be accomplished and the good ending remains, or the mission is accomplished but Cheng does something and changes the future. So it's like, what are we going to have? So this episode was great. I really liked it. So yeah, I'm super curious to know your thoughts down below, what you all thought of this. But this series is really cool, and I'm really liking it so far. So I'm excited to see what all we have in store with old Lou and Cheng going forward. But yeah, I'm all about it. So let me know your thoughts down below. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 3 of Link Click. Bye.